You know Simba and Nala, the great monarchs of the Pride Lands. You know Kiara, the future queen. But did you know of Kion? Kion wasn't born a legend, he became one. But how exactly? Let's explore his journey from playful cub to warrior, leader, and king. Who is Kion? Well, when we first see Kion in the Lion Guard, he's just an ordinary cub. He was adventurous, a little reckless and energetic. He spent his days running about with his best friend, Bunga the honey badger, getting into trouble and dodging responsibility. Safe to say that Simba wasn't always happy with him. But if you think about it, Simba had already gone through a lot. He lost Mufasa, he had to deal with Scar's betrayal, and he nearly lost his entire kingdom. So it's easy to see why he would want his son to be a little bit more serious. But Kion? Nah, he loved living in the present. At least until the roar changed everything. The Elder's Roar. One day, Kion, while playing, suddenly let out a roar. But it wasn't just a simple roar, it was the roar of the Elders, a very old power passed on to the leaders of the Lion Guard, who are the elite group that protects the Pride Lands. And in an instant, this little playful cub had to carry a lot of great burdens. So, following tradition, Simba told Kion that the Lion Guard ought to be made up of lions, strong warriors. But Kion had something else in mind. Rather than select lions, he chose his closest friends, each one of them unique, but each one was the best at what they did. You had Bunga, the bravest, even though it was a wee little honey badger. There's also Fuli, the fastest cheetah in all of the Pride Lands. And then you've got Beshti, the strongest hippo, always up for helping. And then there's Ono, the sharpest eyes, the keenest egret around. And thus they formed the most unconventional Lion Guard. But guess what? They proved everybody wrong. Especially when they were facing off against villains one after another. First, it was just minor threats. Hyenas, jackals, nothing serious, the Lion Guard's day job. But as they grew in strength, so too did their enemies. The first real trouble came from Janja and his clan of hyenas that kept trying to stop the circle of life by stealing food and creating chaos. Kion sent them packing every time, but that was just the start of it all, because after that, there was Scar. Wait a second, Scar was back? Wasn't that dude, kinda, dead? Well, yeah. But due to some very poor choices made by some very deceitful characters, Scar came back as a fiery spirit itching to take back the Pride Lands from beyond the grave. Kion had felt a bit of a pressure as a leader at this point, but now he was on the verge of facing an actual war. And the worst part of it all, he was about to get scarred. Literally. Kion's greatest battle. During one of the final battles against Scar's army, Ushari, the poisonous cobra, executed an ambush on Kion. The moment he was waiting to react, Ushari struck, straight up bite to the face. The agony was unbearable, but the worst part, the venom began to affect him. For the very first time, Kion felt rage and darkness creeping in, along with a fair amount of doubt. The scar on his eye wasn't just a scar, it was a reminder of Scar. And that terrified him. Journey to the Tree of Life. He felt like he couldn't rule in his current condition. The venom was in his body, the fog in his mind, and made him almost incapable of clarity. And as far as the roar, it just didn't feel right. So he made a decision. With his friends by his side, he took on a long journey to find the Tree of Life, a mystical place where they could heal and find some answers. He did come across some old allies and a couple of challenges. But importantly, he made some new allies, and one of them was Ronnie. Meeting Ronnie and the Night Pride. At first, Ronnie, the leader of the Night Pride, didn't really trust Kion, and who could blame her? I mean, come on, a group of strangers showing up at her kingdom's doorstep, that's pretty irregular. But as time passed, she saw the real Kion, a leader, a protector, a lion willing to sacrifice everything for his people. But Kion saw something too. He saw a future. Mastering the Roar. At the Tree of Life, Kion had met the spirit of Ascari, the original wielder of the Roar of the Elders. Ascari had taught him things that nobody else could. How to keep the roar, how to channel it, not in anger, but in wisdom. And in that fateful moment, Kion understood. The roar wasn't just power, it was responsibility. and thus began Kion's journey to master it. Going back home, but not for long. As is typical in stories like this, things had changed by the time Kion set foot back in the Pride Lands. There was now a lion guard formed by Vitani. Kovu and Kiara were working hand in hand to unite the Outlanders and the Pride Landers. Peace had returned to the kingdom, and Kion took his biggest ever decision. Not to stay, not to return to his old life, but to relinquish the roar, rock it over to Vitani. These were the end of his days as the Lion Guard's leader. This isn't the end of the story for Kion, for he'd gone through so much by now that he'd changed. The playful cub, the doubtful leader of yesterday, the lion with the roaring burden. Now he had laid his eyes upon something greater. And so, he went to the Tree of Life, and standing next to Ronnie, he did the unexpected. He became king. The Tree of Life is filled with a lot of different animals from all over the world, and thus Kion had to learn a new style of ruling. Unlike the Pride Lands, where lions were at the top of the social order, the Tree of Life promotes balance among all species. Kion had to learn new customs and cultures, and he had to figure out how to lead a kingdom that wasn't made of lions. Ronnie worked alongside him to ensure that outsiders were welcomed and provided for. He had to look after threats outside of the Pride Lands, which just proved that even though he gave up the roar, he was still an awesome protector. But with all of these actions came a lot of big fan questions, namely, what if he wouldn't have left? Just picture an alternate timeline where Kion stayed behind and never left for the Tree of Life. Would he have been ruling alongside Kiara? Would there unexpectedly have been two rulers in the Pride Lands? A Kion-Kiara version of Mufasa and Scar without the betrayal? Maybe Kion would have just continued to carry out his responsibilities as the leader of the Lion Guard, training new Lion Guard members and protecting the Pride Lands for generations to come. Or maybe that venom would have turned him into Scar Part 2. It's an interesting thought experiment, but one thing's for sure, Kion made an ultimate choice. Because of that, he didn't just become a leader, he became a legend. Leaving the Pride Lands was hard for Kion, but what about everybody he left behind? For Simba and Nala, it meant saying goodbye to their son, knowing that they might never see him rule alongside Kiara. Did Simba feel regret for pushing Kion too hard? Was Nala left to wonder if her son ever found his true purpose in life? And what about Kiara? It was bittersweet for her to lose her brother as she began to enter into the role of queen. He was her protector and her playful yet strong-willed sibling. Without Kion, she now had to carry her burdens alone. Eventually, there was peace in the Pride Lands, but they all still had to wonder if he was meant for something greater. He was never supposed to be all about the throne. His story was about becoming the lion that he was meant to be. From a playful cub, to a warrior, to a leader, and finally, to a legend. This is why his is one of the greatest stories to be found in the Lion King universe. Now here comes the big question. Was Kion right? Should he have stayed in the Pride Lands, or was his destiny always meant to be somewhere else? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like the Kion journey, also smash that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more Lion King content. And until next time, Hakuna Matata.